Welcome back to the JB Sports Podcast. Today is Tuesday, January 13th, and we are back for another pod. So, if you've been listening to us for a while, you've noticed there's a difference. Usually Jason's the one that does the intros on the podcast, but Jason ain't here today. He couldn't be here, but I had to pod today with some recent news that has broken out today. So, no matter what, I think I've already made this very clear over last podcast and like prior ones, is that, hey, like, worst comes to worst. Even if you can't get both of us, you're still going to get me on here, at least talking to the wall for a little bit, if you guys are willing to listen. So, I really don't have much else to say about that. Hopefully we'll get Jason on the next pod. Make sure we have both of us on here at least once this week, especially when it comes to us previewing the games, the second round of the NFL playoffs for the next weekend. So that's about it. He'll be back at some point, hopefully this week, and then we'll do everything we do there, where talk about sports, being stupid, making jokes, all of that. So without further ado, I have plenty of things to talk about, and very little of it's going to be college football today. I think the only thing I have to talk about on that front is going to be because I think on the last podcast we last did it on Friday, so that would have been after the first college football playoff game, and that would have been the Ole Miss Miami game, and then it would have been before, because that night ended up being the Oregon and Indiana game that happened. Again, not a lot to talk about. This game was pretty I don't know what word to use. Mundane? Not mundane. Was it mundane? Boring? I won't even want to say boring, because boring implies that neither team did anything, but there was one team that really did a lot, while the other one didn't really do much. I don't know what word I would use to this. Maybe satisfying to a certain degree, but again, not really satisfying, because Indiana did beat us. I don't know. I'm not going to find a word. I'm just going to say the game was what it was, and that word being blowout, when it comes to exactly, and instead of trying to really describe the game, because that's really what it was. Indiana won the game 56-22. The game was never close. No, I can't say it was never close, because technically you start the game by having the same score, 0-0. But literally from the first snap that Oregon took, Dante Moore, right? Yeah, Dante Moore took, where he threw a pick six to Indiana to start off the game for Indiana to go up that in like 7-0. And then Oregon did get the ball right back, and Dante Moore led the offense all the way back on like a 10-minute drive or something like. Hold on, let me make sure I'm not crazy here. Was it 10-minute or 7-minute drive? 14-play, 7-minute drive to get the game back to being 7-7. And at that point, it's like, oh, okay, Oregon's here. They're going to be a part of this. And they're going to be a part of this game. It's going to be a close one. And then from then on, Indiana just like literally used the rest of the game to pour on to Oregon in a way that they only experienced last year when they got totally destroyed by Ohio State in the playoff. I don't even know what to say about this game. Like, Indiana, I have to give them all the credit, is that I never really looked at them as, ever since last year, with all the pomp and circumstance that Indiana had with them last year, where Kurt Cignati came in his first year being in Indiana, coming in saying, hey, Google me, and like them running through all these teams and really destroying it, like really destroying teams. And then they face some of the bigger teams they have to face last year, hence being Ohio State during the regular season last year, and then against Notre Dame in the playoff. Those two games, they really had no chance to like really stay in those games, and they were just hoping to keep the game close rather than actually going out there and winning it. And then I take coming into this season, it's kind of like the same thing. Kurt Cignati still has that same insane confidence that he has had like forever now. And me as an Ohio State fan, looking at a team like Indiana, who's like one of the more losing programs in all of college football, I have a little bit down on them. And I'm sitting there like, hey, they couldn't prove it last year. They're not going to prove it this year. And I never looked at them as a true threat. And then Indiana throughout this season has not only made everybody, not just me, but everybody, even their own fans didn't think they were going to be on the run that they were on this year. And they're 15-0 at this point, with one game away from having a perfect season from start to finish to win the whole national title and have one of the more improbable seasons in all of college football history. And Oregon is just the latest stepping stone that they had on their way to try to make that history. And Oregon just could not fight it whatsoever. Again, that game was close at the very start because it at 7-7. And then from then on, Indiana had a 21-point second quarter to a scoreless second quarter from Oregon. Third quarter, it was kind of like IU had 7 points to Oregon's 8. And then in the fourth quarter, Indianapolis had another 14 points to Oregon's 7. So, like, this game was Indiana pouring it on, and really it was, like, it really stopped being a game by the time halftime had shown up, because it was like, hey, Oregon's just not going to really doing any fighting in this game. And I don't know, man. Let's start with Indiana. And this is the part where I have to give them a little bit even more credit than what I would truly give them, is that it wasn't like Indiana beat them in a multitude of ways. This was not them just throwing the football with Fernando Mendoza having a bunch of touchdowns. He went 17 of 20 for 177 and 5 touchdowns, 0 picks. So he was very efficient. He did, when he had his opportunities to throw the football, exactly what he did. But like, they weren't sitting there throwing the football a bunch. They did it he threw the football 20 times. Again, very efficient. He had 5 touchdown passes in that time. But it wasn't like they went crazy that way. Running the football, they ran the football for 185 total yards in this game, with 2 different dudes having over 50 yards rushing, and then another 2 guys having 42 and 28. Keelan Black being the main running back, 12 carries, 63 yards, and 2 touchdowns. They literally spread this football out to so many different people. Receiving the football, the leading receiver, Elijah Surratt, 7 catches, 75 yards, 2 touchdowns. Charlie Becker, 2 catches, 48 yards, and a touchdown. Omar Cooper Jr., 3 catches, 17 yards, and a touchdown. E.J. Williams, I'm not even sure who that guy is. He had 1 catch, 13 yards, and a touchdown. This game was so out of hand that their cornerback, D'Angelo Pons, said, hey, coach, I want to be able to get in this game and have a catch too. So they took him over from the defensive side, brought him onto the offense, and got him a catch. I think it was on a 3rd down, and he got that. So, this Indiana team totally and utterly destroyed this Oregon team from start to finish, and this game wasn't close. And, again, maybe after the first time that Indiana and Oregon played, where Indiana really did, it wasn't this bad, but Indiana did beat Oregon pretty convincingly, and I think that's the game that really put Indiana on the map for this season, saying, hey, they actually might be able to do something special this year. I think that was the turning point in everybody's minds for what Indiana could truly be this season, was them going to Oregon early on in the year and saying, hey, we're going to beat Oregon in their house convincingly and really show the college football world that we are here and we are somebody to be reckoned with. And that was the turning point of the season for them, at least when it comes to national sentiment, right? With what people think about them nationally. But obviously, Curt Cignetti and that team probably had a lot of confidence throughout the whole year that they could do the things that they're doing this year, but even maybe to themselves a little bit. Going into that hostile environment in Oregon, it's known to be a very hard place to go and play as a visiting team. And having the success they had against them was probably a big boost to what they're doing. Because again, at some point when you're a coach and you're giving your team, you're trying to give them the confidence to say, hey, we're one of those teams. We can do anything we want to do. And then at some point you got to have that moment where you prove it to yourself that what you're going the right way, and things are working out, and you're all the work you're putting in is really showing up. And that's a game where that definitely came to be. And then now, ever since that moment, they've pretty much ran through everything else. They've ran through everybody else, probably other than Ohio State, where that was a close game. And other than that, they've been destroying everybody else. And coming to this game, Indiana, pretty much on top of the college football world, people were saying, hey, Are they going to be able to defeat Oregon again after already beating them earlier this year? Like Indiana and Kurt Cignetti said, hey, yeah, we can do that and pour it on a little bit more. 56-22. So I have to give Indiana that crazy good offense, efficient, led by Fernando Mendoza. That offense is so efficient, and they can, whatever you want to give them, they're going to do. They're not going to make a lot of bad plays. They're going to be where they need to be. And guys are going to make the catches when they're asked to, and guys are going to make the runs. Like, it is a lot of, like, you can tell watching Indiana play that there is a lot of accountability from every player that is on that field for that team. Everybody's going to do their job. Everybody's going to take advantage of the moment when they get them. And that seems to be the identity of their team when you watch them play. Especially, and then defensively as well. Like, they're going to get after you. They're going to get a lot of pressure on you. And here's the thing. Dante Moore didn't do terrible. 24 of 39, 285, 2 touchdowns and a pick. But it's just there were no explosives to be had. There really wasn't. There was no explosives. Like, I think the one running back, Dyer Hill for Oregon, had a 71-yard run. But that was most of their rushing yards in this game. He had a 171-yard run, and they had 93 total rushing yards in this game. Indiana's defense stops the run. They make you earn it when it comes to throwing the football down the field. Like, I think the longest pass catch for Oregon in this game was Jeremiah McClellan getting a 43-yard reception from Dante Moore. But, like, Indiana's going to make you earn it defensively, too. They are not going to give up a bunch of big plays. They're going to make you nickel and dime down the field. And this isn't with a bunch of 5-stars. I think they were talking about this because, obviously, this is a storyline from this Indiana team being like a rags to riches type of story, is that they're doing this and playing against the Oregon team that has 40-something 4 and 5 stars on their roster, while Oregon, like, Indiana has, like, I think, like, less than 10. I think they have, like, 8 or something like that. Like, Indiana's doing this by having a bunch of dudes that have played a lot of football and that know what they're doing, and they're all doing their job in really good development, and, like, everything that college football is not going to be anymore as a whole thing because of how the portal is and all of that. Like, Indiana might be the last real team to be this way, where they look like they're a bunch of, like, rags to riches guys coming in for a common purpose, not doing it for a bunch of money. And, like, this may be the last team to really be able to make this claim that they are just a team that was built. I'm not going to say built the right way, but as close to your ideal, like, hey, these dudes have been together for a while, they've aged, and there isn't a bunch of money being spent all around, and there's not a bunch of 5-stars. Like, again, I don't even think college football will even be that way anymore because, heck, teams can't hold on to 5-stars. Obviously, Ohio State's and Georgia's and all of that. It's hard to hold on to those type of guys and build that type of depth because of how NIL and stuff are. So, like, that part doesn't even matter. But Indiana, a lot of credit for me. I have to give it to them because I've been one of their biggest haters over the last few years. So, like, when they've went and stuffed it in everybody's face, I'm one of those faces that got stuffed as well by how good Indiana has been this year. And one last thing, if they win this championship, like, I think I'm probably rooting for Indiana to win against Miami next week on Monday. But I think I'll talk more about that specific game on Fridays, probably hopefully when Jason's back. We'll do the preview of that game. I'm rooting for Indiana because obviously I hate Miami even more because I don't think Miami's fans deserve it. I've been talking about that on prior podcasts. Miami fans, there's a lot of fair weather Miami fans where, like, when they're not playing well and they're having a lot of losing seasons and not necessarily being all that productive as a football team, their fans are nowhere to be seen. Like, they're very fair weather, but when things start happening, things are good, they'll show back up again and act like they've been here the whole time when I don't think they have been. So I think I will probably root for Indiana to win that game next Monday, and I'm just like, hey, I think I can give myself into the idea of, like, Indiana having a very magical season. Will this turn into like, Indiana becoming at the top of the sport and, like, really turning themselves into a top of the line college football program? I don't know. Again, I think it'll take more time to really decide that. But there's a real chance, like, this Indiana team can become like what Clemson was in, like, the 2010s, where Dabo had that Clemson team doing so much more than anybody ever thought they could, when they had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence and like they were doing all that. Like there's a real chance for Indiana to be that type of school, no questions asked. But some people like to go with like, oh, can Indiana be the team that is like the best team in the Big Ten as a program over teams like Ohio State? And I'm like, I don't think I want to go that far, but I do think Indiana can really stake a claim over the next 5-6 years or so, and like they can really do something if they kind of keep this momentum going. I really do think so. So a lot of credit to Indiana. Now to the Oregon side. Like I said, second year in a row where Oregon has been destroyed in the playoff when they got there. At least this time they weren't the number one overall seed and looked at as probably the favorite, especially when they were the totally undefeated throughout last year when they were the number one overall seed and everything. But this is the second year in a row, man. You get into the playoff and you get destroyed. And heck, this year it's even worse because, like, at least Oregon got to say last year that they beat Ohio State at home in the regular season to kind of give themselves a little bit of credit. Like, hey, when we faced them on our home turf, we were able to get the win, even though the game was incredibly close. And if Will Howard had slid just a tad bit earlier, Ohio State could have won that game. Unfortunately, this year, they don't necessarily get to have that same sort of what is the word I'm looking for? Silver lining of the season, because Oregon, their two losses that they had this year were both to Indiana. And let's be honest, Oregon was never looked at to be like that team because they've had their flaws all year long. They started the season by missing, like, they lost their best wide receiver. And then during the regular season, they also lost their young freshman stud wide receiver that was really starting to come on and like really starting to do some things. So they were able to get DeCorian Moore. That was the young freshman guy. They were able to get him back before this game, but it almost feels like too little, too late. I think it almost feels like you have to reintegrate him into the offense, and it really never really clicked that way. But again, they just ran into a buzzsaw by the time they face Indiana again. And I don't know if I want to talk about the players all that much, because I think that Oregon's always had a talented team, and I think that's something Dan Lanning has really made really good on, is like, hey, we have the big B. Heck, all my complaints about Ohio State not having a big B billionaire behind you to write the checks to make sure you keep getting really good players, both out of high school and in the portal. Like, he has that at Oregon. He's been taking full advantage of it. And they've always had a very talented team. I think this year it just didn't really work out. They had a talented quarterback, but it's just, again, it's no guarantee when you get the guys that you get either through the portal or through recruiting, is that it's all going to work out. And it didn't really work out this year. Didn't always look pretty for them. But you could tell if Oregon was able to kind of get it all together at the right time, like, they can be a really dangerous team. But it's just offensive line was probably their biggest weakness this year. And like that was a big one for them, because when it came down to it and they played some of these better teams, they just could not keep Dante Moore upright. And for him, even though I think he was a little bit more of like a playmaker, but it's just when things started happening, like, Dante Moore is not the biggest runner at all. Like, he can and he will, but it's not like you have to really fear him when it comes to him running outside the pocket, making plays that way. So like when you get pressure on him, you're going to get him down more often than not. So that was a big weakness for them. And they ran the football pretty well when their offensive line was really able to kind of go downhill and kind of get things going. But not the same thing when it comes to passing the football. Like, they can have some explosive plays, but nothing that's really consistent. And I think Oregon has been a very talented team this year that wasn't consistent. And facing off against this Indiana team both times, it really showed that their weaknesses were there. And they just couldn't get over them. And it is what it is on that. And I am going to make a little bit more of like a holistic argument about Dan Lanning here in a minute. But I think this team in general, I don't really think has anything to feel terrible about. Again, they're just like, Indiana just seems like they're on this run of almost feel like destiny to a certain degree. Like, it's just like, hey, this seems like this just might be Indiana's year, which is kind of crazy because it, like, if you look at it the right way, look at it a different way, you could also say the same thing about Miami and the way their season has gone so far. But like, Indiana just feels like it's their year this year. I think more than Miami to a certain degree. Feels like Indiana's year, and I feel like this feels like the year where it's like we're going to be writing the book on Indiana having the perfect season and being one of the more improbable teams in all of college football history. That's it. I really do think so. I really do think that's the case, and I think Oregon can maybe take a little bit of solace in that. It's like, hey, this is not their year. It's Indiana's. But when it comes to Dan Lanning, man, I really do think he is a top 10-ish head coach in all of college football. But I do think for anybody that's really looked at him and said he can be one of the best ones that is doing it right now, I think you really do have to start taking some of these big games into account, especially in the playoff. And heck, this year they lost the same team twice in Indiana. And they're going to keep getting talented players. That's what Dan Lanning does. He's a crazy recruiter, and they have all the Nike money behind them, and they're going to use that. They're going to keep getting players. But I think to a certain degree, you do have to start and ask the question, is that as much talent as you have being Oregon and Dan Lanning, and you've had quarterbacks coming in, and like they're not, like he keeps getting them out of the portal. It's not really more of like a homegrown situation. I think Dante Moore is probably the closest thing to a homegrown guy that they've had, because he had transferred to Oregon last year, sat for a year under, why am I forgetting the guy's name? Oh no, Dylan Gabriel. He sat behind Dylan Gabriel last year, and then he kind of came in being a starter this year and looked relatively good doing it. Like, he's a very talented guy. He can get a lot of big passes. He can throw. He can do a little bit of running. And I think he's a very talented guy. I think he's the closest thing to a homegrown guy they've had in a minute. But heck, going into next year, are they going to... Dylan Raiola he has now transferred to Oregon from Nebraska. And apparently he's saying he's willing to sit for a year if Dante Moore does come back and is a starter at Oregon. But even if not, like, that's like what Oregon has decided to do is that they're going to go crazy when it comes to recruiting guys out of high school at every other spot rather than the quarterback. And then it feels like every year they're like, hey, we're just going to go and portal for another quarterback, and hopefully that can be their plan going forward. But Dan Lanning in these games, and it's not just these games it's not just these last 2 years. It's been multiple years in the past before. Think about it when they were in the Pac-12 2 years ago, and they were facing off against Washington, and things didn't go their way in that big game. And it's just like Dan Lanning really does have that sort of question that needs to be answered now, because in these big games and these big moments, he isn't just playing these teams close. And more often than not, he's getting blown out in these big games in the playoffs. So, I compare him to a guy like Ryan Day because he has everything he needs at Oregon. Players, money, prestige. Like, everybody looks at him as like one of the brighter head coaches in all of college football. But when it comes down to them losing these games, nobody really looks at Oregon and says, hey, maybe you need to start asking some questions about Dan Lanning as a head coach and whether they can get the job done with him at the helm. Well, again, I'm not saying it's going to be forever that he can't get the job done, but I do think if Ryan Day had lost games like this in the playoff where he's getting blown out, I do think that would be something that Ryan Day would get a lot of heat for, and I just don't think Dan Lanning is getting as much heat for it. Ryan Day is losing these games close to both Indiana and Miami in the Big Ten championship game, and in the playoff very close where it feels like Ohio State should win those games. And Ryan Day is getting a ton of heat from Ohio State fans and college football fans at large. Talk about how he can't win these big games and he's fumbling the bag to a certain degree. And like he's losing the games close. Like what do you say about Dan Lanning, who's getting totally blown out by these teams? By Ohio State last year and by Indiana this year. I do think that you do have to start asking some of those questions about Dan Lanning as well. Again, he's a very young guy. He has plenty of years to coach left in him. Like, he can totally flip that narrative on its head if that narrative does start to come. But like that is a question that should be asked. It is. I just think that's something that does have to start to be that does have to be a conversation that has to be attached to him to a certain degree. I don't know. Again, I think I've gone a little too long about this whole thing, having a more holistic view. But Indiana, 56, Oregon 22. Indiana's like they're 15-0. and they're one game away from really finishing off a very magical season. We'll talk about that game on the next podcast on Friday, I believe. So that's about it on that. That's it for college football for now. Let's go ahead and get to the NFL, which I have a lot of things to talk about. You have the games this past weekend, wild card weekend, and all of those and how those happened. I think 4 out of the 6 games were awesome. And then the two primetime games, the Sunday night game and then the game last night on Monday Night Football, were absolutely atrocious. But let's get to it, man. Should I just start with the game last night and get it over with? Because I do want to talk about Tomlin first. Yeah, okay, let's do that. So let's get to the game last night, because I just want to get to that first, get it out of the way, because it is the front of my mind type of thing. It really wanted to, I already planned a podcast today because it is what it is, and that it's Tuesday, so that's our schedule. But when the news came out today, being what the game happened last night against Houston, and then the news that came out today about Mike Tomlin, it had me raring to go. A lot of thoughts in the brain about this whole thing and how can this be a bad decision to a certain degree? Maybe not bad. Can it be? What are the chances that this is looked at as being a good decision down the road? But before I get to that, let's go ahead and get to the game that happened last night between Pittsburgh and Houston. The game wasn't pretty, folks. It wasn't. As a Steelers fan, I was looking at it. When we made our picks, I picked Houston to win the game. Jace picked Pittsburgh because he loves to wish on my downfall, and he knows that even if we won this game last night, we would definitely not be looking good going into next week. And I think he understands my pain of hey, we're not going to win the Super Bowl, so every week you go farther into the season, keep winning the game, you have a worse draft pick. And with a team that is in need of a quarterback for the future, having a pick that's in the 20s is definitely not the way to go, and it's only going to get worse as you keep winning throughout the playoffs. So he picked Pittsburgh, I picked Houston because I just didn't want to, I knew what this game was going to be, man. And I made the case on the last pod that, hey, this is about to be the Steelers just cannot, I think defensively they can be able to get a lot of plays done, which is exactly what they did last night. It was a very close game for 3 quarters for the most part. And the Steelers stayed in it because the Steelers defense was awesome. They really got a lot of pressure on CJ Stroud and really kind of got to him and the snapping issues that were happening for Houston. And in the red zone, they had a couple, I think it was 1 or 2 turnovers in the red zone. So a lot of things Pittsburgh Steelers defense did to kind of keep them in this game. But when it came down to it and it was time for nut cutting time, and a Pittsburgh Steelers offense had to do something to take advantage of those times where the defense got them plenty of good field position and to have opportunities to go and win the game. They just couldn't do it last night against that Houston defense. That was it. The Steelers defense did exactly what they were supposed to do, and the Steelers offense was what it's been all year. Especially against a very good Houston defense that was able to get a lot of pressure. The offensive line had no chance to stop Houston from getting after Aaron Rodgers all night. And the game went exactly how I thought it would. Again, it got very ugly in the fourth quarter where Houston scored 23 unanswered points to make that game from 7-6 to then 30-6. That included a scoop and score for the defense, for Houston's defense, and then a couple other scores by Houston's offense being set up by the Steelers. Heck, it was also a pick six at the very end of the game. At really when the game was over, it was 24-6, a couple minutes left. You know what's funny is that I stopped watching at the 6-minute mark because I was I'm done. This game was pretty much over at that point. But then I had to watch it on the back end after the game was all over and realize hey, they scored another touchdown. I didn't even see. So the way I look at it, man, it was exactly how I thought this game was going to go. And let me get to Houston first. CJ, 21 of 32, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 250 yards passing. He did not play great. It wasn't. I think the pressure was getting to him a lot last night. I think the one thing the Steelers defense was able to do was they were able to get a lot of pressure on him. They sacked him 3 times. I think they forced a couple fumbles. CJ Stroud had 5 fumbles last night. Well, only 2 of them lost, of course. But like there was a strip sack by Captain Jack Sawyer from Ohio State, Buckeye on Buckeye crime. That sucked to see a little bit, but it's football. But it was like CJ did not have a great day. Again, losing Nico Collins early on in that game definitely didn't help. I think he left the game with a concussion. It was a pretty bad concussion as far as anybody with intel in the situation was talking about. Like, it was pretty bad, the concussion that he had. So, like, he probably won't even play next week with how bad it was. But even without him, man, like for 3 quarters, they were able to get down the field. Not necessarily down the field. They were able to move the football, but almost felt like every time they had a big play, there was a negative play that would come right after. And they could just never string enough plays together to Houston really could have, their defense was good enough that they dominated the Steelers from start to finish. This could have been a blowout very early, but it's just the Pittsburgh Steelers defense came out and they showed out and they got a lot of pressure and they made it very hard on that CJ Stroud and that offense to be able to do anything. Heck, even times where Houston got into the red zone and looked like they were about to score and really take control of the game, the Steelers picked the ball off in the red zone. It was the one bad pass CJ, terrible pass CJ threw, and they were able to kind of keep him from scoring. But again, the Steelers just could not take advantage of those moments when those plays did happen that the Steelers defense manufactured. And the Houston ran the football relatively well, 19 carries and 112 yards for Woody Marks. Nick Chubb had 10 carries for 48 yards. Woody Marks also had a touchdown as well. Receiving, Christian Kirk, when Nico Collins went out, it was hey, who's going to be the guy? Christian Kirk had an awesome day. 8 catches, 144 yards and a touchdown. Jaden Higgins, the young rookie wide receiver, 3 catches, 39 yards. And they just had a bunch of other dudes catch passes, man. Xavier Hutchinson, Nico Collins, he left early, but he had 3 catches. Cade Stover had a couple catches. Dalton Schultz had a few catches. They were just kind of sprinkling the ball all around. And again, it was the Steelers secondary was never going to be absolutely dominant against this Houston team, but it was the front 7 for Pittsburgh that was really able to get after CJ and make this game a lot harder, a lot closer than it ever should have been for three out of the 4 quarters. But it was just in that 4th quarter, Houston was able to explode. And let me get to the Steelers side of this thing that kind of sucked to see altogether. Aaron Rodgers, 17 of 33 for 146, 0 touchdowns and a pick. They started off the game very hot because I think Houston was playing a lot of man-to-man defense, and they were getting torched by DK Metcalf a little bit early in that game. And as soon as Houston went to zone, it was when the Steelers' offense totally combusted. They couldn't run the football anymore. They couldn't pass. I felt like every single time Aaron Rodgers was getting a lot of pressure on him. He got sacked 4 times in this game, but it should have been even more than that. Batted balls by the Houston defense. The Steelers couldn't run the football at all. 63 total yards rushing in this game. Again, it wasn't like the Steelers were great at running the football all year long. But it felt like in times they were able to kind of unlock that and really do a little bit better. But against that Houston front, it was never going to happen. And then DK Metcalf thing. DK had 2 catches for 42 yards. And that was very early on in that game. And then DK had a couple drops that he had. And it almost felt like he had a couple drops there in the first half, and then he didn't get the ball for another 2 hours. And it felt like they didn't even try to look his way. Again, there was one play where it felt like if Rodgers would have got the ball out, it would have been a touchdown. It would have been he was wide open down the field. Ended up being a strip sack that Houston managed to scoop and score, go right into the end zone. But they just Aaron Rodgers, when things don't go his way and when he's getting pressured and all of that. And this is the part I have to really put on Aaron is that during the year, whenever things weren't going well, and again, this has been his pretty much his last decade of his career. He's been very prickly. He's not a guy that ever really wants to take blame on himself. It's always they did it, not me. I did my job. They didn't do theirs. It's always a lot of finger pointing with Aaron Rodgers, and I hate to say that because maybe in the locker room he's a pretty good locker guy. He's a good teammate. But on the field, you just literally after every play, if things don't go exactly how they're supposed to, you could see him yelling at a teammate or accosting them. And this isn't one of those when Tom Brady did it and it felt like he was obviously he's going to yell at you if things weren't going right, but he's going to be the guy he's the leader. He's going to take responsibility and do what he has to do as a leader to try to lift up everybody to try to play better. That's not Aaron Rodgers' style. And again, on a team where he is the old guy and he's trying to bring together an offense that doesn't have a lot of veteran dudes, and the offensive line is very young. I think that's the youngest part of this Steelers team. And if Aaron Rodgers is sitting there yelling at you all day long when things aren't going well, and he's never going to take responsibility for what he does wrong in a game, at least it doesn't feel that way when he's sitting there yelling at anybody he possibly could and like giving the side eye to people. And it's just a lot of bad body language throughout a game. And it happened again last night. Again, I'm not like, again, when you're getting getting totally like bum rushed all day long, like he was, again, that might be a bad term to use. When he's getting destroyed all day long and his offensive line isn't getting a lot of good blocks and getting a lot of time to get there and do the job, I mean, I get that. But I also think that it's just, you're not really inspiring any sort of confidence out of anybody when he's doing what he's doing on the football field. And when he does have opportunity, again, he's 43 years old. He's not going to be able to extend plays. He's a statue back there. All those things that I knew were going to be the case coming into this season. But it's just, I just don't know. Again, Rodgers did what he was, like, I think Alf Rodgers had a very decent season for what I expected coming into this year. I think he did the best that he could with this offense and what it was. I really do. I really do think he did that. But I also think when times get hard, Aaron Rodgers is not a leader that's going to be able to get you through those rough times. I just don't think it's going to be the guy. When things are going great, he's a great, loving teammate, and he's going to say all the right things. But when things aren't going well, he's going to be the first person to turn on you. So, like, that's the thing about Aaron Rodgers, man. Like, that what he's been over the last decade of his career, that you can definitely say negative about him. And again, the offensive line did so terrible that I just don't think there was anything he was going to be able to overcome how bad the offensive line was and how dominant that Houston defense was. I just don't think there was anything that he could do. But I just think that he could have been... I don't know. A better leader, I think, to a certain degree. I hate to say it that plainly where it matters, but I just think while watching that team, man, last night, like, they probably needed somebody to help pick them up, not necessarily accost them and keep hitting them and knocking them down. Houston defense is already doing that enough to those guys on offense. I don't think they needed Aaron Rodgers to do that on top of it. But DK Metcalf had a few drops. I think he wasn't used for the rest of the game, and it was just a bunch of guys getting the ball, a lot of short passes, and they just couldn't do anything offensively, dude. They got the football with great field position multiple times because the Steelers defense made a lot of great plays, and they couldn't even get to fucking field goal range to really take advantage of it, let alone get into the red zone and have a chance at touchdowns. And it is a total team disaster offensively. I think the defense for the Steelers did exactly what they needed to win this game, not to win the game, for the Steelers to have a chance to be in the game and have a chance to go win it if they wanted to take it. And unfortunately, the offense wasn't able to do that against that vaunted Houston defense. And that's exactly what I thought it was going to be coming into this game. And that's pretty much all I got to say about it, man. Like, there was a reason the Steelers came into this game. They were playing at home in the playoffs, and they were 3-point underdogs coming into this game. There's a good reason for that, because Houston's a better football team. For all the trouble that CJ had, he's a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers. And that Houston defense is a lot better than what the Steelers defense is, in the secondary especially. That's the difference. I think both front sevens are awesome, but I think that secondary for Houston was the difference in this game. So, and again, I just think DK Metcalf, like, there were plays to be made. There really were plays to be made. If they had a chance to, like, really give Rodgers some time and be able to get some bigger passes down the field, like, there were plays there. But it just didn't happen, man. And it's another year, and this is the part where this was one of the stats that got me. This is now Mike Tomlin, as the Steelers head coach, now tied Marvin Lewis for the most consecutive playoff losses with 7. That sucks, man, because I talk so much shit about Marvin Lewis in his time with the Bengals. I talk so much shit about them and how they were playing around for so long, and why do you keep Marvin Lewis around when he's not going to do anything for you in the playoffs? And then I heard that stat last night, and I'm like, man, that shit really got flipped on me, huh? Because coming out of last night, I didn't think that there was anything that Mike Tomlin could do to fix that game and how it was going to go last night. I really don't. I don't know how Mike Tomlin fixed that game. I think that this was a total team loss, like organizational loss. I don't think team loss. I think the defense did what they were supposed to do. I think this was a team loss because this Steelers team has been put together with duct tape and Band-Aids and bubble gum for so long because they've always been trying to plug holes rather than actually try to fix the foundation of this team in a way that is meant for modern age NFL football. And I think that I honestly, coming out of the game, I didn't think Mike Tomlin was going to leave. It was a conversation, and people were talking about, is Mike Tomlin going to be the head coach for next season and going for long term, and is he going to step down? Maybe he can go to TV for a season. Like I thought last night, like, hey, he's probably going to stick around. My whole thing was like, hey, how are we going to go get a quarterback? Because I don't think we could do another year of Aaron Rodgers again. I just don't think that's. Anytime anybody talked about like, oh, maybe Aaron Rodgers can come back for another season, I'm like, no. At some point, you have to like make the move. You have to go take a chance to go build for the future. And this whole Aaron Rodgers thing, putting the Band-Aid on the issue, has not fixed it. Again, I get it. The Kenny Pickett thing didn't work out well, and it wasn't pretty. But I think you're not going to fix it by just keep throwing Band-Aids on the issue. It's not going to, like, you need to build this team up differently. And I thought Mike Tomlin was going to be around for the ride, and it didn't turn out to be this way coming into today. So let's get to the news. So the news of today was that Mike Tomlin, they had a meeting, Mike Tomlin with the owner, Art Rooney. And Mike Tomlin told Art Rooney, hey, I'm going to go ahead and step down as the head coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I will not be coaching in 2026. And that is a piece of news there, because technically, because he's stepping down and not getting fired, the Steelers do own his rights for next season because he is still under contract. So if anybody were to try to want to sign him and like really want them to be their head coach, they would have to trade for him because the Steelers still own his rights as the head coach. So, but again, for what everybody's saying, that Mike Tomlin's probably going to take a year off, maybe do some television and all of that. But the news is that Mike Tomlin won't be the head coach anymore. After 19 seasons as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach, he is now gone. And one of my buddies kind of sat there and texted me when it happened. He's like, hey, how do you feel now that he's gone? And I'm not going to lie to you. I don't feel the same sentiment when it comes to Mike Tomlin that a lot of Steeler fans online and in the world do, where they were like, fire Tomlin, we need a new voice, and we need change, and firing Mike Tomlin is the main thing of that. And I don't feel that way, right? Because this is what I feel, right? Because I do think Mike Tomlin, the time of having a coach like Mike Tomlin may be done, because Mike Tomlin isn't an X and O's guy. He is a rah-rah culture guy as a head coach, and I just don't think it's going to work in the NFL anymore, because you have to have a good offensive mind. Even if you have your quarterback, you need to have a good offensive coordinator to kind of help offenses stay good. And if you have a good offensive coordinator, he ends up becoming a head coach, because everybody's looking for the next great offensive head coach to go be the head coach and play caller for their quarterback. So I just think that in general, I think Mike Tomlin's days were numbered. But I think in this scenario, they didn't fire him. He steps down. But again, I feel like it was more of a mutual decision between him and Art Rooney. I just don't know if he was going to be he is just changing out the head coach is not going to fix what this Steelers team has been over the last 10 years. Again, the record goes on Mike Tomlin. He gets to have the 7 straight playoff losses as the head coach. He also gets the never has a losing season mantra. Again, as a head coach, you either get too much credit or too much blame. And I think that he, in this situation, is going to get a lot of blame, because people are going to be looking at it as a new day in Pittsburgh where there's a chance for change. And I'm like, if you're just changing out the head coach, you're not going to get the change that you're looking for if you're a Steelers fan. And I'm a Steelers fan, of course, myself. And this is why I think that way, is because Mike Tomlin never had full control over what the roster was going to be. He's been there long enough, you would think that's the case, but that was never the case. He never had full control over how the team was constructed roster-wise. It was always a team thing, and that was always been the mantra over the years with Pittsburgh, is that this is always a team decision. When it comes to roster stuff, it's between the GM, the head coach, and the owners. And nobody ever talked about that, because I think the owners, even though I think the Rooneys are a very good set of owners and they know what they're doing and all of that, but they do meddle a little bit. Like, they are more involved than they would like fans and people on the outside to think. They do have their fingerprints all over this team. But when it comes down to it, it's a team thing. Nobody's ever going to take responsibility, but here's the thing. They are never going to be talking to the media for anybody to question them on that. It's going to be Mike Tomlin. It's going to be Omar Khan. It's going to be those guys that have to be the forward-facing ones, because the Rooneys understand, like, hey, we don't need to be the people out there talking to the media, because then we might have to answer for being a part of the bad decisions that have happened on this team that don't just go on Mike Tomlin. You think it's Mike Tomlin's total decision about what the quarterback position was going to be? No. I don't think it was all on Mike Tomlin that we haven't been able to get a quarterback ever since Ben left. Maybe he was a part of the Kenny Pickett thing, but that wasn't all on him. And putting all this money onto the defensive side of the football, I don't think that is just a Mike Tomlin decision. That is a ownership and GM and what about all the misses when it comes to drafting and, like, not putting enough time into trying to draft offensive players, and, like, there's some real skill positions that the Steelers have not done well about drafting over the years. That is not all those things are not on Mike Tomlin. Let alone when it comes to offense and not putting enough money into your offense, the offensive line issues is not all on Mike Tomlin. Like, there's a lot of things about this team that I think have to change if they're really going to become a team that can compete on a week in, week out basis in the NFL as it stands as of right now. It is a more offensive league. You cannot be the team that spends the most money on your defense and can win football games consistently, because guess what? During the season, offense wins you games. And then the defense definitely becomes more of a thing in the playoffs, but again, you have to get there first. And even the way this team has been built, it's just so much money being put in the defensive line, but not really put in anything else, maybe offensive line and secondary and, like, this, that, and the other. And it's just like, this team is not, like, this is not, again, I hate to go so far into it, but this is not all a Mike Tomlin problem. And if you want to think that maybe this is the Steelers' opportunity to really change from a fundamental level, from an organizational level, from the bottom up, maybe this is the opportunity they're going to take. Mike Tomlin isn't there. Maybe they'll say, hey, maybe we're going to go get another young coach and we're going to build this thing from the ground up in a different way that they're going to try to build it up. Maybe take one step backward and take two steps forward type of thing. Maybe that's going to be the case they're going to do. Maybe they'll be willing to accept having a losing season or two for a couple years to maybe build the roster through the draft and be able to maybe draft a quarterback necessary. Like, maybe all those things are going to be what they're going to do now that they've fired Mike Tomlin, and really maybe this is a chance for them to take a real hard reset as to how they run their organization. Maybe that's the case. Do I have a lot of confidence that's going to be how it goes? I don't think so. Because the Steelers, for so long, they have put their mantra of they're always trying to go win a championship. But, like, at some point, that's with the way that the NFL has to be able to build teams up, you're almost doing yourself a disservice by not taking advantage of one of those when you're always drafting in the 20s. At some point, you have to be in the top 10 drafting players so you can get some really elite players to then build your team around. And I just think that's, like, the Steelers really need to change from the ownership down, dude. And I just think that if just firing Mike Tomlin and hiring a new coach is going to fix all these issues, that's not going to be the case. I tell you that right now. That's just not going to be how it goes. So, I don't know. Again, I think after I see who the Steelers end up hiring as their next head coach, maybe I'll feel differently and maybe I'll be a little more confident as to what they're going to do in the future. But like, I don't know, man. I just don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to make the right changes to really become. I really do think if there's a blueprint that the Steelers need to try to follow to really like turn themselves into a team that could be more modern and like be that and like really take that next step of really trying to win again. I hate to say it, but they need to become more like the Ravens. The Ravens just take a little more change. Again, I think the Ravens and the Steelers are really close as organizations as to how they are run. They're really organizationally run the same way. Like they strong ownership, really good GM, and they try to draft well. But it's the difference between the Ravens and the Steelers that the Ravens are they're way more aggressive in the draft and really getting like good players and like really doing it that way. And like, I just think the Steelers have been so mundane and always taking the picks that you have. And I think they've done a little bit more of like trading a second round pick way to get DK Metcalf. Maybe they've been a tad more aggressive as of recently, but like they need to do that more. What gave the Ravens a new start or new lease on life 7-8 years ago? It's when they traded from the second round pick back into the end of the first round to pick up Lamar Jackson. That takes some balls. That takes some real, like, seeing the forest through the trees and, like, sitting there saying, like, hey, this can be a guy we can build around and being aggressive and, like, looking at the uber talent that he was and say, hey, we can change our team around to fit this super talented guy and hopefully he can have a maturation into being the quarterback that he ended up being for the Ravens, being a guy winning multiple MVPs and getting them to the playoffs most of these years and like being one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. That's what it takes. It takes some real aggression at the fundamental level, and I just don't think the Steelers have had for a long time. And like those are the things the Steelers need to be able to do. The offensive line issues, like again, they've put a lot of picks into their offensive line. They have a lot of young guys, but like it just hasn't worked out as of yet. Like there's a lot of things about this team that needs to change outside of what Mike Tomlin was doing. And I don't know. I just don't feel very confident that they're going to make those changes as well as now getting a new head coach. I'm has yet to be seen. I'll be very happy to be wrong, but it's just on first thought, like in my gut feeling, I just don't feel confident that the Steelers are going to make the necessary changes to really change the way they've been over the last 10 years or so. But we'll see. Mike Tomlin. Oh, before I end this and go to the prior games throughout this weekend, Mike Tomlin, man. As long as I've been a Steelers fan, it's been because I remember watching the Super Bowl. I watched the Super Bowl with Jerome Bettis as a young kid, very young kid. I think that might be one of the earliest NFL football games I ever watched. I remember watching that game with Jerome Bettis and Big Ben winning that Super Bowl against the Seahawks. And I ended up becoming a Steelers fan more after that in the next Super Bowl that they played in with Mike Tomlin being the head coach. And one of my, like, as a Steelers fan watching that game, because I ended up playing for a Little League team, a Little League football team, and they were the Steelers at that point. And that's why I decided I was going to become a Steelers fan. And then a couple years later, they end up being in the Super Bowl, and I watched them go and the Santonio Holmes catch in the back of the end zone to beat Arizona. Like that was when I really fell in love with Steeler football. And Mike Tomlin was the head coach for that. And I think as a Steelers fan throughout my life, I've had one coach throughout my fandom as a head coach, as a Steelers fan over the last around 16, 17 years of my life. Like that's 17, 18, something close to 20 years of my life. I've been a Steelers fan, and Mike Tomlin has been the head coach of that team. And now with him being gone, he has brought us so much success. He has never had a losing season. I respect him as a black man myself. Seeing a black man as a head coach be one of the more tenured coaches in all of the NFL is one of the more proud moments of watching, because there's not a lot of head coaches out there like sitting as a head coach as long as he has. And the fact that he, as a black man, was able to do that for as long as he has and have had so much success and so much respect for everybody in the NFL, I think there's something to be said for that. And when it comes to him, like when he talks to the media and like everything he's about, he's a good dude. He's a great motivational speaker. Anytime you hear him talking about him coaching and him wanting to bring the best out of his guys and not being afraid of having hard conversations, like all of those things, I have come to totally respect about Mike Tomlin, and that's off the field. And then not to mention what he's been on the field, winning a Super Bowl and having all those successful years with Ben and never having a losing season. Like there's been a lot of things about him that I think over the frustration of the last 5 or 6 years or so, they've soured a little bit for a lot of the fan base. But I hope that as you get more and more years away from Mike Tomlin being the head coach, I hope those fans that have been really frustrated can learn to have some real love for what Mike Tomlin has done throughout his tenure as being the coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, man. I really hope so. Because when he has to hear in his own home stadium throughout this season, fire Mike Tomlin, that hurts. It really does. As a fan of him and as a fan of the Steelers, that does hurt. Because he's done a lot, man. He's done a lot. And I get it. He grows stale. And I get it. Maybe this is a necessary change. Whether I think it'll actually lead to some real big scale changes. I'm not going to go down that road again. Like I already just talked about that for the last 20 minutes or so. But I think he did a lot of good things, man. I think he was awesome. And I feel like I really respect him. And I don't know. I'm a little I wasn't this emotional earlier. I really wasn't. But it's an end of an era, dude. It really is an end of an era. And I really I'm seeing fuck. I respect him, man, and I hope whatever he goes to next, if he just wants to do TV for the rest of his career, I hope he's awesome and he can have fun and like keep doing it. Because when he comes to media and all that, he's a great guy to listen to, and I'd listen to him talk about anything. And it doesn't have to be football, but the fact that I get to listen, I've listened and watched this dude talk about football for as long as I have. I've really grown to appreciate it. So if he decides to do TV for the rest of his life and can have a nice cushy job and not have to worry about the grind of coaching an NFL team, I hope he does amazing at that and has a great time. If he ends up after this year of not coaching, once he doesn't coach in 2026 and he decides to come back and coach somebody else, as long as it's not for anybody in the AFC North, I hope he goes to wherever he goes and has all the success he wants in the world. Because he deserves that too. And I think he's an awesome head coach, and I feel like he gets to be the guy to fall in the sword when I think there are a lot of dudes in that organization that deserve to have that same sort of treatment. I really do. I really do. And I'm not talking about the teammate. I'm not talking about the players. I'm talking about the organizational level that they get to hide behind the Steeler emblem. But Mike Tomlin had to be the one to fall in the sword in this scenario. And I don't think it's all Mike Tomlin. I really don't. But it's just, I understand the people that want change. I really do. But I just think you have to go a little bit deeper, man, or you're not really going to get to the root of the issue. And I feel like there are a lot of fans and a lot of people out there that don't want to go deeper because everybody has such respect for the Steelers' name and the Steelers' team and their history. But I think the roots are where there might be some issues too, that they don't change those. Getting rid of such a great head coach as a Mike Tomlin won't help anything. You're going to have this, keep having the same issues, no matter who ends up being the next head guy at the helm at the head coaching position for such a great franchise in the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that's all I got on that. I know I got a little emotional there and it got slowed down a bit, but I just couldn't help it, man. I had to talk about it, and it sucks. It sucks a little bit. All right, let's go on to the next thing. Let's see. When it comes to how should I do this? Should I just start from Saturday on? I'll go back to the beginning. I started with the end. Let's go back to the beginning, go to the Saturday games, and then we'll just kind of go through the slate that way. The first game on Saturday was the game between the Rams and the Panthers. It's a 4v5 game, the 5 seed being the Rams, and then the Panthers being the 4 seed, having a home game. Again, they were 8-8 on the season. They did not deserve, they were 8-9 on the season, less than 500. They did not deserve to have a home game, but, I'm I've already made my case on that, but we're not going to go too far down that lane, down that road. And Rams win the game 34-31. This was a back and forth affair. I have to give the Panthers a lot of credit. They came into this game and they had nothing to lose, man, and they played like it. And as much as I talked about Bryce Young and how he has been up and down this year, I do think he has taken enough steps forward to make the Panthers at least want to take another opportunity to have another year. Maybe he can take the next step forward and really become a guy for them to be like their franchise quarterback, but I just don't think he's that as of right now. But in this game, the Panthers played well, man. Again, I'll talk about the losers first, and then I'll get to the Rams. Bryce Young, 21 of 40, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. They ran the football relatively well. Hubbard was their main back. He had 46 yards off 13 carries and 2 touchdowns. And then Bryce Young also had a touchdown run of his own off of 3 carries and 24 yards. The Panthers did really, especially once they started like really throwing the football down the field and like really going after the Rams secondary. I think they had a lot of success. Jalen Coker, 9 catches, 134 yards and a touchdown. There was like really nobody in that secondary for the Rams that can stop him. Again, this is the Rams. That is the weakness of their team, is their secondary is absolutely atrocious. And if you throw the football and really push the ball down the field, they don't have a secondary that can stop you. And I think the Panthers realized that in the middle of this game, and they really got going that way. Tet McMillan, 5 catches, 81 yards. He did a lot. He did a lot of damage against that Rams defense. And the Panthers, defensively, Matthew Stafford did not play awesome in this game. I think he was good. He had a really good stat line, 24-42 for 304 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. But like the Panthers, like they played some good football, offensively and defensively. And they took advantage of the opportunities that were there, and they really made this game close. It came down to the final minutes where the Rams had to score their last touchdown with like 30-something seconds left to take the lead. Am I crazy? So the touchdown for the Rams, they scored with 2 minutes left, 34-31 to take the lead. Like it was a back and forth affair, man. There was how many lead changes in the fourth quarter? The Panthers had a touchdown to take a lead. It was 1, 2, 3. There was 4 lead changes in the fourth quarter. That is what I call a very competitive game. And the Panthers were there for it. I feel like as much as I've talked crap about the Panthers and how they don't deserve to have a home game and how they've been up and down, and I've talked my trash about Bryce Young and how not good he has been throughout his NFL career so far. But this year and in this game, I think he showed a lot of promise, and maybe if he can take that next step, maybe he can be a guy for them. But the Panthers really did show, and they played a very good game. And they pushed the Rams to the limit. Again, the Rams didn't play great, and they didn't play as great as they needed to. And their defense totally got abused in this game. But when it came down to it, like the Rams did what they had to do to win the game, but it was not pretty. It was much closer. Again, these two teams are not on the same field when it comes to level of talent and how good the actual teams are. But when it comes down to it, that doesn't always matter. Like that's on paper. Like when it comes down to it, when you have to go play a football game, the Panthers came to play and the Rams weren't necessarily playing their best, and that's what allowed the Panthers a chance to really come out and win the game. But again, when it came down to and it was time to deliver, Matthew Stafford did what he had to do to like get the win. Like I said, Matthew Stafford, 24-42, 304 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Oh, by the way, one last thing about the Panthers. I made the claim to Jace is that would have been better if they had won the game or lost the game before the game even happened. And I made the claim that it was better for them to lose because then they wouldn't get tricked into thinking they had to pay Bryce Young. And again, they lost, but Bryce Young played good enough to where they do have to at least take the 5th-year option and really see if he can take one last final look to see if he could take the next step. And if not, they can go and draft a quarterback after next season. But I think that, I don't know. I don't know, man. I have to give the Panthers credit. I think they came out and played some good football where they absolutely needed to in the playoffs, which is more than I ever thought they were going to when that game started. LA Rams running the football. They didn't run the football all that great. Kyron Williams had 57 yards rushing. Blake Corum, 45 yards. Again, they didn't run the football all that much. They only had like 29 yards, 29 total carries for their running game on that game. Puka Nacua also had a rushing touchdown. He had 3 carries, 14 yards, and a touchdown. But the Rams really didn't run the football all that great. Again, 116 yards, it was enough, but it kept their offense moving. But it was definitely more on Matthew Stafford to throw them out of trouble, and that's exactly what he did. Puka Nacua was awesome in this game. He had the 1 rushing touchdown that he had, and then he also had 10 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown. He was awesome in this game. Puka Nacua could not be stopped. Devontae Adams in his first game back in a while, coming off the hamstring injury. He had 5 catches, 72 yards. Tyler Higbee had 2 catches, 45 yards. Kobe Parkinson, another tight end for them, had 2 catches, 34 yards, and a touchdown. Kyron Williams had a touchdown catch at the running back position. The Rams definitely did not play their best in this game. Matthew Stafford did not play his best in this game, but when it absolutely mattered, they made the plays they needed to come back and win this game and keep themselves in the playoff hunt. Well, not playoff hunt, but in the playoffs to try to win a Super Bowl. Me, as a guy that was talking about how good the Rams are, would I feel more confident about them if they would have played a little bit better defensively? Probably. But I think I've listened to a couple of things to talk about how the Carolina Panthers, because of their coaching staffs and what they've been a part of, I think they know the Rams pretty well and what they like to do offensively as well as defensively. So maybe that's the case, but it's just, I don't know, man. The Rams did what they had to do. They won the game, but it's just, can they have that bad of a defensive performance against some of the better teams they're going to face later on in the playoffs? I think they have to face not Seattle. They have to face who they have to face in the next round. Hold on. In the next round they have to face the Bears. Can the Rams again? Can it be just a shootout? Whoever has the ball last, and the Rams can win that game potentially. But I think their defense, if their defense is not going to show up again, it's going to be all on Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. And the bunch of tight ends they have on that team to go ahead and win the game and kind of have a back and forth affair. But I don't know, man. It's a weird one. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think the Rams are probably the most dangerous team. But the fact they have to face the Bears in the next round is definitely gonna be a scary one for them because the Bears' offense is humming right now. But the only thing is that they like to lull for the first couple quarters and then come back at the end. I don't think you could do that against the Rams, dude, because I think the Matthew Stafford and that team will, shut the door on you and keep scoring if they have to. But again, it was a very good game with them and with the Rams and the Panthers. But it was a scary one if you're a Rams fan for sure. Next one on that Saturday game, it was who was the next game there? It was the Packers and Bears on Saturday. Bears-Packers. Bears had to play a game. They were the hosting the playoff game. They were the 2 seed to Green Bay being the 7 seed. Bears won the game 31-27. This was a tale of two halves for the most part. In the first half, Green Bay scored 21 points. It was 21-3 going into halftime, and it felt like Green Bay was really controlling the game. And heck, even through the third quarter, Chicago only scored another 3 points. It was 21-6 at the end of the third quarter. And it felt like Green Bay was really controlling this game from start to finish. And then Green Bay had an epic collapse of a fourth quarter where they let Chicago score 25 points to Green Bay's 6 to come back and win that game. I'm not going to put this on Jordan Love, though. Jordan Love had a decent game. He went 24, not decent, he played well. He went 24-46 for 323 yards and 4 touchdowns. They didn't run the football all that effectively. I wish they would have done that. Again, this is the thing. When you got such a huge lead in the first half and then you go into the second half being a lot more conservative and not doing everything you need to do in the second half, they're not really keeping the foot on the pedal and they're just trying to run out the clock. You need to run the football a lot better than they did, and they didn't. Josh Jacobs, 19 carries, 55 yards, and then they had 99 total yards rushing in this game. Was definitely not away from the win this game if they were going to try to run out the clock in the second half like they tried to. Romeo Doubs had a good game, 8 catches, 124 yards and a touchdown. Matthew Golden had 4 catches, 84 yards and a touchdown. Jaden Reed, 4 catches, 43 yards and a touchdown. Christian Watson, 3 catches, 36 yards and a touchdown. So, like, they were, like, when they were moving the football and they were doing what they had to do, like, they were able to score. But it's just that lull in that third and most of the fourth quarter, they just allowed the Bears to get back into this game. And I think more than anything, that's what the Bears have proven throughout this season, that like that's what they're going to do. If you were going to give them an opportunity to light up offensively late in the game to try to come back in these games, they're going to try. And more often than not, they're going to come back hot, and they're going to make it very difficult on you if you're not going to close the door on them. And that's on the Packers. Like, that's on their head coach LaFleur, where they could have closed the door on this Bears team to even not give them a chance to even come back in this game, and they couldn't do it. Again, credit to the Bears. You still have to walk through that door and take advantage of the opportunity if the Packers aren't going to close the door on you. But like the Packers, just again, when you've been a team that's been doing things, getting into the playoffs as much as you have over the last few years, like you have to understand when you have the opportunity to really control the game and like really put an end to it, you have to finish the job. And the Packers just couldn't do it. They did have an opportunity to come back and win the game. At the end, it ended up being a last-second heave by Jordan Love to try to get it into the end zone. It didn't work out. But it's just, again, 25 points from you let Chicago score in the fourth quarter. Again, this is probably why the Green Bay Packers picked up a guy like Micah Parsons, and he would have been helpful in this game when you're just trying to run up the clock and like you're just trying to get after them and because the Bears would have to throw the football as much as they did in the third and fourth quarters. A guy like Micah Parsons, being the supreme pass rusher that he is, would have definitely been a huge help. But again, that's not how football works sometimes. They didn't have him because he was injured. And you have to do what you have to do in these big moments to get the job done, and they couldn't do it. Not defensively, then offensively, they really didn't help all that much either. But getting to Caleb Williams and the Bears, man, I have to give them a lot of credit. Caleb Williams, I talked so much crap about him last year because he had made himself so unlikable when he was with the USC and talking so much trash. And like, again, am I going to sit here and say he was doing it on purpose? I feel like there's just a certain bravado that he has. And I think as long as you back it up, it's not that bad, right? And it felt like at USC and then in his first year with the Bears, it felt like he wasn't really doing what he's supposed to do. Like he wasn't backing up that bravado that he kind of walks around with. But this season, man, coming into this season, a lot of people doubting whether he could be the guy long term or not, whether he can change. They got him the genius head coach in Ben Johnson. Sorry, not Brian. They got him the genius head coach in Ben Johnson, who's the offensive guy. Can Ben Johnson help him progress as a quarterback to like maybe make those changes to become the superstar to match the talent that he has, like the undeniable talent that he has to be a very good starter in the NFL? And it didn't start off great, but as the season has went along, he's become better and better. He's not very efficient when it comes to when it comes to completing passes, but other than that, man, he's everything else, dude. You need some spectacular plays, he can do it. If you need him to run and extend plays, he can. If you need him to just drift to his right while having a guy draped on him and kind of getting out of it and jumping and hitting a crazy flag route towards the sideline and hit that too, with not being able to step into the throw with crazy precision, he can do that too. Like he is a supreme talent at the quarterback position. And throughout this season, he's just been getting better and better, dude. And in this game, it was so bad for 3 quarters. And then he was able to light it up in the fourth quarter. He ended up going 24-48 for 361 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. But again, when it mattered most and they required his best play in that fourth quarter to come back and win, that's exactly what you got out of him, especially with that game-winning touchdown drive. I think that was to... Who was that touchdown catch? Who was that touchdown throw to? I think it was to DJ Moore. Okay, so they got the DJ Moore touchdown pass to go up 31-27 in that fourth quarter. But when they needed him to play his best, he did. Again, he's still not efficient. He's still not always going to hit the easy passes you think are there. But when it's time to turn it on and let his talent go out there and shine, he can do that. He really can. And I think Ben Johnson, coming in as a head coach / play caller, I think the one thing that he has kind of made Caleb be better at is not taking sacks. And I do think that is a big deal because what Caleb Williams was doing in his first year was trying to do all those things of extending plays and doing all that, but he was taking a lot more sacks. But I think the fact that he's not taking nearly as many sacks this year has really kept them in football games. Again, you have to even if you're not going to be playing your best at certain times in the football game, you have to survive. And by not taking sacks, you're able to survive some of those lulls a little bit when your offense is not being able to do a lot. But with him not taking as many sacks, being able to make the read possible, and maybe he doesn't hit those passes all the time, but he's not going to have you behind the sticks a lot. And that's the thing. Like he's cutting down on the negative plays, and I feel like that has changed their offense entirely. And as Ben Johnson been helping him out, and he's been getting better and better, I think they've been becoming a lot better of an offensive team. That secondary and that defense for the Bears is not good whatsoever. But again, if a team's going to keep letting them have the opportunity to come back and win these games when they're down, the Bears are going to keep taking it. And the Caleb Williams is shown to be ready for the moment when that does happen. And he did what he had to do. Running the football, the Bears didn't do much of that. They ran the football for 93 total yards in this game. DeAndre Swift was the leading back, 13 carries, 54 yards, and a touchdown. But, it was all on Caleb Williams, man. They could not run the football at all. It was him or nothing. And most of those times when he was throwing the football, he was throwing it to Colston Loveland because Colston Loveland, the young rookie tight end for them, had 8 catches, 137 yards. A lot of catches for that guy. He's a very talented tight end. Awesome. Again, I hate to say it because he's a team up north guy. DJ Moore, 6 catches, 64 yards, and a touchdown. Zacchaeus had a touchdown catch. He had only 1 catch, 8 yards, but that 1 catch was very important with the touchdown catch. Roma Dunze, his first game back in a while, he had 2 catches, 44 yards. Luther Burden, 3 catches, 42 yards. Swift had a couple catches. Monungai had a catch. So it was all on Caleb Williams, man, and he did what he had to do. And I have to give that Bears team a lot of credit. Again, it makes you question, hey, what happens when you face a team that's not going to let you come back? And again, when it happens, it happens. But until then, you have to give them a lot of credit for taking advantage of these opportunities and coming back and winning these football games. You do, and I'll give them a lot of credit for that. Again, can they do that against the Rams? I'm not sure, but again, the Rams' defense is pretty bad too. So maybe they're that game will be a light show. I think I really do think so, as long as the weather allows it, of course. Because January weather in Chicago can be a little bit finicky. So if the weather isn't great, I think it might change the calculus a little bit for how explosive that game can be. But I think going into it, I'm definitely expecting a lot of points to be scored in that game. On to Sunday's games. I think the first one was the Jags and Bills game, I want to say. Or am I crazy? Hold on. Let's see here. Let me make sure I'm not crazy here. Wildcard weekend, Sunday game. Okay. The first Sunday matchup was Buffalo and Jacksonville. Buffalo won the game 27-24. This is a very good game. How do I even put this game into context? Okay, so 27-24, Buffalo wins the game. Let's start with the Buffalo on this one. Josh Allen, 28-35, 273 yards and a touchdown. They really didn't run the football that great. James Cook had, I think it was 15 carries, 46 yards. He was nowhere near the same production-wise as he has been throughout the season, where he was the leading rushing yards getter in all of the NFL. So they did not run the football nearly as well as they needed to in this game. At least James Cook did not. Josh Allen, 11 carries, 33 yards, 2 touchdowns. When it came down to it, they did what they had to do, especially in the red zone. He was able to get some hard yards to go ahead and get a couple rushing touchdowns for himself. Khalil Shakir was awesome in this game, 12 catches, 82 yards. Brandon Cooks was big in this game, 3 catches, 58 yards, had some really clutch catches, especially in that second half where they were trying to come back and score some points. I think it was in the fourth quarter, there was 3 or 4 lead changes. And Brandon Cooks had some really big chunk catches to help with that. Keon Coleman had a catch for 36 yards. Dawson Knox, 3 catches, 30 yards. Dalton Kincaid, 3 catches, 28 yards and a touchdown. But again, this game was Josh Allen centric, dude. And Josh Allen centric, and I do have to give the Buffalo Bills a lot of credit defensively that they did make life hard on Trevor Lawrence. Even though Trevor Lawrence did not play great in this game. But it was because Buffalo was getting after it defensively, dude. And I think that secondary made it very hard on Trevor Lawrence, muddied the field for him to where he wasn't able to, didn't always look very confident in what he was looking at. And like he had a couple picks in this game and they took advantage of that. In the pass rush got after Trevor Lawrence. Even if they didn't get to him all the time, they were getting enough pressure on him to kind of keep his to rush him a little bit, to keep him be able to sit back there and feel comfortable to make all the throws that he needed to. So the Buffalo Bills defense played some very good football on Sunday against that Jacksonville Jaguars team that were literally, Trevor Lawrence was red hot throughout the last 5-6 games of the year, playing some very good football, almost like their offense could not be stopped by anybody. But when it came down to it in a big moment, there was one quarterback that lived up to the moment and one that didn't. And Josh Allen, the guy that we put so much pressure on to hey, if you don't get to the Super Bowl this year, it may not ever happen, which again, maybe a little bit too much blame on him as a quarterback for, it's a team game. There's a lot of other things besides one player that has to go on in order for a run to happen. But in this game, I have to admit, Josh Allen, it did get to a point in that fourth quarter where it was going back and forth, and it felt like Jacksonville and Trevor Lawrence was going to do enough to win this game, that I did get the feeling that, it just got to a point for me when I was watching this game, man, it feels like that Josh Allen is just going to find a way to win this game. I think it was, how many lead changes? I want to make sure I get that right. It was Jaguars scored a touchdown to go up 16-13. That's one lead change. Buffalo Bills then come back with a 65-yard touchdown drive to change lead again. There was 4 lead changes in the fourth quarter. So this is a back and forth affair, and this really was Josh Allen going and making the plays happen. Because again, there was really nothing else working. When it comes, and it wasn't like they had Khalil Shakir was very good and he had a lot of catches, but it really wasn't a lot of explosive plays. This was nickel and dime on the field, and Josh Allen had to go out there, make the passes necessary, and not make the big mistake. And guess what? He didn't. And I don't even think he played his best. I don't even think he went Superman mode or anything. I just felt like he did exactly what was necessary for him to win this football game. And that included not making any big mistakes when it comes to picks or fumbles. And he didn't do that. And guess who did? Trevor Lawrence did. Trevor Lawrence, 18 of 30 for 207 yards. He had those 3 touchdowns, but he had 2 picks. Especially with the one pick being at the end of the game where they had an opportunity to come back. And I think how much time they have left when they got that ball back for the last time. It was with 3 minutes left. The Jags got the ball back with a chance to go down and win it. And then they literally first play, Trevor Lawrence throws a pick when he was trying to push the ball down the field when he didn't have to. They had a lot of time left. It was 3 minutes, and they had a lot of time to get down the field and get into field goal range, either tie the game or go ahead and try to go win it. But he didn't have to try to push it the way he did, and he did, and it was a bad mistake. And again, sometimes that's the difference, man. It's just again, Trevor Lawrence did not play great in this football game whatsoever. He had the 3 touchdown catches, but those 2 picks were absolutely deadly to that football team. But otherwise, it was Trevor Lawrence. Let me see. I already talked about him running the football. Jaguars did so much more running the football than the Buffalo did. Travis Etienne, 10 carries, 67 yards. Bashal Tutin, 4 carries, 51 yards. Trevor Lawrence had 31 yards rushing off 6 carries. They ran the football for 154 total yards in this game to Buffalo's 79. When it comes to receiving, Parker Washington had 7 catches, 107 yards, and a touchdown. Trevor Lawrence had a number one guy that was really getting some real production and getting into the end zone. Parker Washington did. Travis Etienne had a touchdown catch. He had 5 catches, 49 yards. Brian Thomas Jr. had a touchdown catch. So, it almost felt like everything stat-wise looked like Jacksonville should have won that game. But when it came down to it, it was the mistakes that Trevor Lawrence made, and then it was Josh Allen making the plays necessary to win, and it almost felt like it was the first time I looked at Josh Allen and been like, hey, this the same feeling I got when Mahomes was doing what he was doing, and felt like it was just Josh Allen's going to find a way to get the job done. And he did, man. He played a very good football game. He played awesome. And it was a very insane game to watch, and it was a very fun game to watch. But it's just like, again, it's another big, like, Trevor Lawrence, as much as he progressed throughout this year and he felt like he was a much better quarterback, when times get hard, you kind of go back to what you are, and it was Trevor Lawrence making some mistakes that, are not new for him in the playoffs by any means. So, it was a very good game. Josh Allen, I feel like the best player left in the AFC, man. If he can kind of keep things going, and when he needs to go Superman mode and not necessarily have to make the big mistakes, I do think he has a real chance to come out on top in the AFC, man. I really do think there's an opportunity for it, especially if he keeps playing like that. And that Buffalo defense, absolutely amazing. Like, Buffalo's defense really did play a very good game of football, even though they gave up some plays and Jacksonville did get theirs. But in the big moments, they were able to force some mistakes, and like they did what they had to do in that game. I have to give Buffalo a lot of credit because they don't have a bunch of like big name guys on that defense whatsoever, and they more than held their own, and they made a lot of good plays in that game. Next game, San Fran, Philadelphia. San Fran won the game 23-19. This game was like, it was kind of gross. In the first half, right, Philadelphia came out hot, okay? I think the first 3 drives they had in this game, they scored all 13 points they scored 13 points in their first 3 drives. And I think they had like 150 yards in those first 3 drives. The Eagles were running the football well. It looks like they were hitting some passes to A.J. Brown, and they were doing what they had to do. Saquon Barkley had a couple big runs in that stretch. And it looked like the Eagles were just like, because coming into this game, the thought was like, hey, the Niners are too hurt. Their defense is battered. Even though, do I think the Eagles' offense is fixed? No. But can they just do enough with that defense, with the Philadelphia defense being as good as it is? Can the offense just make enough plays to kind of go ahead and take advantage of that San Fran defense? And it felt like in the first half that was going to be the case. It really did. It felt like they were going to be able to roll, but it's just after those first 3 drives, they just couldn't do anything for the rest of the game. Jalen Hurts overall in this game, 20 of 35 for 168 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 picks. It's just they just couldn't push the football down the field enough, and they couldn't, like, their offense stalled so hard after those first couple drives they had, and they scored those 13 points. They just stalled, man. They couldn't get the job done. Again, they had a couple field goals they probably could have hit that would have changed the game a little bit. I think there was a missed extra point in that first touchdown that Philadelphia got. And then, let me make sure I'm not crazy. Yeah, so they had a mixed extra point in the first touchdown that Philly got, and then they had a couple missed field goals too that definitely didn't help. But it's just more of the same for Philadelphia, man. It's just their offense totally sputtered out. They weren't able to get the job done. Saquon Barkley they even got some decent running game going in this game. Like Saquon, 26 carries, 100 yards. He averaged 4.1 yards a carry. Tank Bigsby had 19 yards off 4 carries. Jalen Hurts had 14 yards rushing. They had 140 total rushing yards in this game and a touchdown. Like, they were able to get the running game going, but just in the passing game, we just weren't able to get enough going. Devontae Smith, 8 catches, 70 yards. Dallas Goedert, 4 catches, 33 yards and a touchdown. I think Dallas Goedert also had a touchdown run as well. Saquon had 25 yards receiving. A.J. Brown, 3 catches, 25 yards, man. And he had a few drops in this game. I think he had like 2 or 3 drops, especially in big moments. Like, if he would have got him, the game definitely probably could have changed. And I'll talk about him real quick before I get to San Fran. It's when you have moments like these, it makes you realize why you don't want to talk shit when things are going, like, during the whole season when AJ wasn't getting the ball and he was so open to talk about how bad the offense was and how he needs to get the ball more and that the offense has so many issues that need to get fixed. And he was so open to talk about all of it and air out the dirty laundry and be a little bit messy throughout the year. And I kind of agreed with him to a certain extent, because I'm sitting here like, hey, you're almost gaslighting him for so much, like talking about how there is no issue and we keep winning, it doesn't matter. But I kind of got on his side a little bit, because I'm sitting there like, you can't tell a guy that there's no issue and you're not going to address it, but then everybody knows it, right? So it almost felt like A.J. Brown was more of a truth teller throughout the year. But this is the problem why you don't want to air out your dirty laundry in front of everybody, because when you're not getting the ball, and everybody agrees with this. Everybody agrees he wasn't getting the ball enough. The offense wasn't good enough. And all these things were an issue. And then you come into this game at the biggest moment when you're needed. And let's see here. A.J. Brown got targeted 7 times. He had 3 catches. And he had more than a couple drops. He had like 2 or 3 drops in this game. And on one of them, it was a very hard catch for him to make. But you got to lay out. He was like it was a deep ball. It wasn't necessarily perfectly thrown, but he could have laid out for the football, man. He could have. Again, I get it was windy. Maybe those things that happened, but it's just like when you have a day like this where you make a mistake, when you have a bad day, you're not going to get any sort of credit when you've been the one crying wolf all year long. He's been the one talking so much stuff and like airing out dirty laundry all year long, and then when you get your moment and you have to show up and you have to be that dude, you have a bad day. So now you're not going to get any sort of what's the word I'm looking for? You're not going to get, not credit. Nobody's going to feel sorry for you. Nobody's going to feel sorry for you. And the next thing you know, he has a bad day and then comes out after the game when press comes in. Guess who ain't there? A.J. Brown's not there to sit there and stand 10 toes down and talk about how he did not do enough to win that game. He is the one that ran from the media. But guess what? The dude's been talking to the media all year long when he wasn't getting the football and he was able to blame everybody else. But now that it was time for him to stand at the podium and like go and take responsibility for him not playing his best when it was needed, he was nowhere to be found. That's the reason why when things are going bad and that's why you don't do what he was doing throughout the year. Because now when it's your turn to get the spotlight on you and you didn't do what you needed to do, that's when it becomes an issue. And I feel like A.J. Brown had that happen to him. And when it came down to it, he wasn't ready to sit there 10 toes down and take the scrutiny. But he was more than happy to throw the rock when it was somebody else's house getting taken down. But now that it was his, he ran off. I don't know, man. Like, it wasn't a good day for him, man. It wasn't a good day at all. And heck, Devontae Smith, he did what he had to do, 8 catches, 70 yards. Like, even if Devontae Smith had a bad day, I think Smith did all he could do in that game for what it was. But even if he had a bad day, people are going to give him a little bit of reprieve, or they're going to like feel better for him because it's like, hey, we understand people make mistakes, but you haven't been the one talking crazy all year long about the offense and doing it in public and almost making a stink about it and like making it such like it almost felt like A.J. Brown was making it a toxic locker room by him talking about the offense the way that he was, and Devontae Smith wasn't doing nearly as much as that. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's just the Eagles, it's more of the same. It wasn't like I really thought the Eagles, I thought their defense was awesome. Their defense was championship worthy, but that offense was nowhere near that. And heck, against playoff teams all year long, they've only scored 20 points one time against all the playoff teams that they had faced throughout the year. So like their offense has been an issue all year long, and it was just more of the same in this game. But again, it was just like they fired their offense coordinator today, so they're going to try to find a new OC. And it didn't help that after one of the plays where A.J. Brown dropped it, there was like a whole sideline exchange between why am I forgetting their head coach's name now? Let me see here. Hold on. Why am I forgetting the guy's name? Why am I forgetting his name? This isn't good. Why? Why am I doing this? I think I'm thinking of a. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm on why I'm forgetting his name right now. Let me make sure I get his name. Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni and AJ Brown had a whole sideline exchange where they're yelling at each other. It did not look pretty. So that also doesn't help at all either when things aren't going well and all that. But they're firing the OC. Hopefully they can get a new guy there. I think, you know what I also have to say? I think some of this falls on Jalen too. And again, he's going to have a lot more credit amongst the fans and amongst the organization than anything Nick Sirianni is going to do. And AJ Brown definitely, because AJ Brown's made things so messy throughout these last couple years, talk about the offense and all. But I do think Jalen Hurts does have to take a little bit of responsibility for the fact that this, he has not progressed enough in the offense. Like the offense has not progressed. He has not progressed. And it felt like a lot of the same things. He's a streaky thrower, man. Maybe that's never going to change. But that is something that he has to own as well. Like that's on him. And the offense isn't great. There's some people talking about how he's the one holding back the offense to a certain degree. And because he's not reading the defense right and he's not doing what he has to do and not progressing the way he needs to. But he has to own that as well. This is partial on Jalen Hurts too. He is not without blame in this whole scenario because guess what? He's the quarterback. He's getting paid a lot of money to go out there and do what he has to do. So he has to take on that responsibility as well. So that's all I got on the Eagles. Let's go to the San Fran side of this thing because they did win the football game. San Fran scored the 23 points. Brock Purdy, 18 of 31, 262 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Didn't play the best, but guess what? When it was absolutely necessary, they had to go out there and win, and that especially in that fourth quarter where they scored those 13 points to come back and win it. Brock Purdy was awesome, and he did what he had to do, and he made a lot of good plays. Juwan Jennings also had a touchdown pass in this game. He went 1 of 1, had 1 throw for a touchdown, 29 yards to Christian McCaffrey. Definitely a big one. Christian McCaffrey was the leading man for this San Fran team. He had 15 carries and 48 yards rushing, and then he also had 6 catches, 66 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He was awesome. Christian McCaffrey, without him, he has been the one mainstay on this San Fran team all year long. And again, there's been so many injuries defensively that it's just kind of hard to rely on that defense at all because they've been missing so many guys, Nick Bosa, and there's so many different guys defensively. But offensively, man, Brock Purdy was gone for part of the year. But guess what? Who's been the mainstay? It's been Christian McCaffrey. George Kittle to a certain degree too, but in this game they lost him and he wasn't able to play. I think he got hurt in the first half. Tore his Achilles, unfortunately. It hurts. It sucks. Not hurts, but it sucks to see that play that happened because you watch it and you can literally see his Achilles rupture. It's obvious rubber band snap in the back of the calf. But it was very, very bad injury to see. It sucks that George Kittle had to leave this game. He's going to be gone for probably most of next year. That part definitely sucks. So now losing him, that makes it even more of a thing. Christian McCaffrey is the only dude, the only mainstay for that offense, and he did what he had to do. He was awesome. Demarcus Robinson was leading receiver for the Niners in this game. 6 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown. And I think most of that came in the first quarter, and he was just sitting there making some big plays. Definitely big. He had a 61-yard reception as well. Demarcus Robinson, a 3rd, 4th, 5th string guy on that offense, came out and played some very good football when he had to. Kyle Juszczyk, 4 catches, 49 yards. He made a big impact in this game. Juwan Jennings had the 1 catch and 45 yards, but again, he also had a touchdown throw, so you could probably give him a pass on him not having a bunch of catches. So, San Fran, they survived the output that the Eagles had in that first half where they were looking like they were being a little bit better. But then the second half, man, it's just they survived and they kept it. They just kept going at it, and that Eagles defense was good in this game. That San Fran team did not sit there and score a bunch of points because the Eagles defense wasn't good. It was just because they were able to survive the onslaught, and they finally found something that worked. And they used a trick play, and they made enough plays at the very end to win it. But that Eagles defense made it very difficult. But it was San Fran just kept pushing, and then they finally got the job done in that fourth quarter when they scored those 13 points. So all the credit to San Fran. Again, I'm not sure how this translates into next week because now they're going to be without George Kittle on top of it, and now they have to go play Seattle again in their house, now being without George Kittle as well. So I'm not sure if they can really get the job done next week against Seattle with how many injuries they've been dealing with and all of that. But, man, you have to give San Fran a lot of credit. You have to give not Stefanski. You have to give it's Kyle Shanahan. You have to give Kyle Shanahan a lot of credit for being the head coach of this team that has so many different injuries and they just keep pushing, man. So you have to give Kyle Shanahan a lot of credit for getting this team through it, and they've had so many injuries, and they went 12-5 throughout the regular season, and they had a chance to be the number one overall seed, but they lost to Seattle in that last game of the year. But it's just, I'm not sure what's going to be next week against a good Seattle team that's going to be rested and coming off a bye because they got that number one overall seed. So I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I think San Fran has more. Again, they're going to go out and play that game hard, and Christian McCaffrey's going to go do his thing, and Brock Purdy's going to go out there and play well. But it's just, I'm not sure how that's going to lead to a win because I just think so many things are going against them with all the injuries and everything. But San Fran, man, I have to give them a lot of credit for surviving all of the injuries they've been dealing with this year to get to this point. I have to give them a lot of credit, and they definitely got a big win against this Eagles team on Sunday. And then the last game on Sunday night game, this game was, it was gross. It was LA Rams at New England. New England wins the game 16-13. This game was a slog fest. This, again, like I said, the two primetime games this past weekend and wildcard weekend was the Sunday night game and the Monday night game. The two games you thought was going to be the best ones did not turn out to be that way. Let's start with the Patriots first. Drake May, 17-29, 268 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 pick. Drake May was also the leading rusher for them in this game. He had 66 yards off 10 carries. He definitely had to be the lone guy really making a lot of big plays for them in this game. Ramondre Stevenson had 53 yards off 10 carries. Travion, 9 carries, 27 yards. They ran the football relatively well. They ran for like 146 yards in this game. Ramondre Stevenson was leading receiver in this game. He had 3 catches, 75 yards. He'd have like the 148-yard reception. It was like a dump-off pass when they were close to their own end zone, and then they just dumped it off to Ramondre, and he took it to 45 yards down the field. Keyshawn Boutte, 4 catches, 66 yards. Hunter Henry had 3 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown. Stephon Diggs really didn't do a lot in this game. He had 2 catches for 16 yards, but they just didn't need it because guess what? The Chargers' offense was so anemic. No, sorry. Let me before I get to the Chargers. Drake May did not have his best game. He got sacked 5 times. And he did not have his best game. Like, it almost felt like the moment was a little bit bigger for him than everybody thought it would be because he had played so well throughout this year. And he came out. It didn't look great. But he didn't make too many mistakes, and he was able to keep the team on track enough to be able to win this game. Again, the Chargers were so anemic. They didn't need a lot from Drake May to win this game. But they got it. They got what they could. They got out of this game. They're at home, so like they did what they had to do, but it's just Drake May did not play his best. Hopefully in the next one, he'll be able to play a lot better when they go face off against Houston. But again, that defense is even more trouble than what the Chargers defense is. So I'm not sure how he's going to be able to play a ton better against a very good defense in Houston. But again, the Patriots did what they were supposed to do. They took advantage of a bad team not playing good football, and they won the game. So you have to give them a lot of credit for that. But getting to the Chargers side here, Justin Herbert was not good in this game whatsoever. 19 for 31 for 159 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 picks. He did get sacked 6 times, but I will say that most of those sacks felt like they were coming in the second half. But in the first half, like there were plays to be made by this Chargers team. And it just felt like there were some plays that Justin Herbert, if he would just like stayed on his guy enough and kind of kept reading the field, that it felt like he just kind of like I know the offensive line has been awful this whole season. And I mean awful. I really do. But it almost felt like in this game, he was overreacting because of how bad the offensive line was, and they were giving him a little bit of time at times. But he was like, he was so quick to get off of reading the defense and like saying, "Hey, I'm about to get sacked," that there were some passes that he missed. Not only just throwing the football, when it comes to just him getting off the read and like getting off the guy that was coming open, he went away from it too soon. And when you're a guy that's been playing in the NFL as long as Justin Herbert has, you would think that he'd be able to push forward a little bit through the adversity and play a little bit better in this situation. And that just wasn't what happened in this game. And again, if it wasn't for him and doing what he did, especially him running the football, because they couldn't run the football either, but him kind of like having the 10 carries that he had for 57 yards, they wouldn't even gotten the 3 points that they got. Like, their offense was absolutely anemic. But I do think Justin Herbert has to hold a good portion of the blame on that, because I think at some point we have to expect him to be able to push through the adversity a little bit more and be able to get through these tough moments, because he's been playing in the NFL as long as he has. He is not a rookie anymore. He has been in the NFL for 5, 6, 7 years now. And in these big moments, like, he's now 0-3 in the playoffs, like in embarrassing fashion for 2 of those games. And I'm just like, again, the offensive line will get better. I feel like they'll get to a certain spot, but I'm like, at some point, for a guy that we know is as talented as he is, like, we have to start seeing some results on the field in the big moments when it matters. And that hasn't happened, and that is something he has to hold on a little bit of blame for. But the defense for the Chargers did what they had to do. Let me get to some of the other players that maybe did something. Ladd McConkey, 3 catches, 32 yards. Gadsden, the tight end, 3 catches, 30 yards. Keenan Allen, 3 catches, 25 yards. Vidal, the other running back, because Amarian Hampton did not play because they said he was healthy, but then he didn't play at all. I think he played like a couple snaps in the first quarter and then didn't play it all for the rest of the game. So obviously he wasn't healthy. Vidal, 2 catches, 20 yards. Trey Harris had a couple catches for 20 yards. Quentin Johnson had 20 yards off 3 catches. So like, they just weren't able to get anything going in this game at all offensively. And again, the offensive line is part of it, but I think Justin Herbert has to hold on, take some responsibility for that as well, because I just feel like you have to. He's been playing too long, man, and I get it. I don't know. I don't want to sit here and like blame him only for the issues, because the issues were definitely there offensive line wise. But there were chances for plays to be made if he would have sat in there and like toughed it out and got to them. But it didn't work out in this game. And then by the time the second half happened, it was like pretty much over. And then he was just getting like literally destroyed every single play, because the Patriots are like, hey, they're just not getting any separation on us when it comes to their wide receivers. So we're just going to keep sending pressure and make him have to, like, make the hard play. And they couldn't do so. And they got after him more often than not. So credit to the Patriots defense for getting onto the idea that the Chargers weren't going to do anything. And they just kept pushing the issue and just making Herbert have to be a superstar in order for them to do anything, and it just didn't happen in this game. But the Chargers defense did what they had to do. They made life hard on the Patriots and Drake May, and they got after him. They got 5 sacks in this game. So the Chargers defense did what and their secondary did make it hard on the Patriots to really do anything, throwing the football. But it was just, again, when your offense is doing nothing for the whole game, at some point things are going to start breaking open a little bit, and that's kind of what started happening at the end of the game. It was just the Chargers defense just couldn't do anything, man. Chargers defense did all they could, but it just wasn't enough because of how bad the Chargers offense was. But that game was totally awful to watch. It was that game and the Steelers game were the 2 worst games you could possibly view as a human. But again, I had a little bit more invested in the Steelers game, so maybe just me, black and yellow colored glasses, thought that the game was a tad bit better because I was more invested in it. But those 2 games, absolutely awful. It sucked that those 2 were the 2 primetime games, but it is what it is. Can't always tell the future that way, obviously. Hindsight being 2020. But that's all the games. I really have nothing else to talk about when it comes to those. You have the games coming up, the divisional round coming on next this upcoming weekend. So we are going to get going. We're going to get more in depth about those games and make our picks when we do the Friday podcast. So we'll definitely wait for that one when we'll get into those games and make our picks and do all that. But that's about it on the games. I talked about all of them. I talked about Mike Tomlin. Do I have any stories I wanted to talk about before we get out of here? Let's see. No. No, the Ravens owner eyeing a new deal for Lamar by March. They're saying they're trying to get a new deal for Lamar because apparently his cap number hits like $75 million based off of like the dead cap money and all that. So they are going to want to redo the deal so they can get the dead cap money down, so they can try to keep rebuilding that team around him because they need a lot of help on defense if they want to get back to doing what they're doing next year and get to the playoffs and all of that. I don't know, man. I feel like, again, they have to get that deal done because they have now picked between him and Harbaugh. They picked for Harbaugh to get out of there, so they literally have to attach themselves to Lamar without any. They have to. Like, if whatever happens and they don't get him to stick around, then they should have stuck with Harbaugh at that point because now they don't have a coach or a quarterback. So they pinned their tails to the quarterback in his prime that's won a couple MVPs, which I totally understand. But now you have to make sure you get that deal done to make sure it all works out. So, but other than that, I don't really have any other stories to talk about here. That's about all I got. So we've been going on for about close to 2 hours now, hour and 50 minutes. So a little bit longer than I thought. That was going to be more like an hour and a half. But I think I went on a little too many tangents about some of the things I wanted to talk about. But, but it is what it is. I always say that I try to be a little bit more succinct and not as long when it comes to these podcasts. But, I try, but I never guarantee anything. So it is what it is on that. So that's about it, man. So let's go ahead and end the podcast here. I don't want to extend this any longer. If you've been listening for a while, we appreciate you. If you're just now joining on, hopefully you like us and enjoy us enough to join us on this ride to talk about sports the dumbest way possible. If this is the first podcast you've listened to, hopefully you can go ahead and listen to a different podcast with both me and Jace on to get a different idea of what we are at our best when you have both of us being the co-hosts, being brothers, being sports fans, talking shit and making jokes and all of that. So hopefully if this is the first podcast you've listened to, hopefully you go listen to a different one to get a better idea of what we are at our best. If you've been listening for a while and you kind of sit here and you've been listening to me talk for this whole podcast for close to 2 hours now, I definitely appreciate that. But that's it there. If you've been listening for a while and if you appreciate what we do, we would appreciate if you could do a couple things for us. If you could like our podcast, subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast 5 stars wherever you listen to us. We're pretty much available on all audio platforms out there. Make sure you do that. And also make sure you share us, friends, family, enemies, anybody you feel like could enjoy the podcast we put out on a weekly basis. With it being 2 times per a week during football season, we would love if you can do that. And then last but not least, if you can follow us on Twitter and or X, whatever you'd like to call it, at JB Sports Pod is the podcast handle. At Javante Boozer is my handle. And then at Jace Boozer1 is Jace's handle. And that's about it. So without further ado, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for always listening. Have a great day. Have a great night. Goodbye, y'all. And we will see you guys in a couple days.